When I transitioned from the high-pressure world of corporate investigations to establish my own detective agency, I was completely unprepared for what awaited me. I envisioned a more tranquil existence, but trouble seemed to follow me relentlessly. My wife Rachel was initially supportive and enthusiastic about the prospect of a more stable life. However, as my cases became increasingly complex, the line between my professional and personal life blurred. One evening, after concluding a particularly demanding case, I noticed Rachel acting unusually distant. Our conversations felt strained, punctuated by awkward silences. Despite my attempts to connect, something was clearly amiss. Ironically, my honed investigative instincts seemed only to exacerbate the situation. Then a woman walked into my office, and I instantly knew she would be a catalyst for chaos. It wasn't entirely her fault, but the air crackled with potential trouble the moment she entered. "Hello, Mr. Calloway," she said nervously. One look told me she was married, like most of my clientele. "Mark Calloway," I responded with a small smile. "Not the singer. I hear that a lot. My dad named me after some fictional spy from those old pulp novels. Just Mark, not Marcus. Anyway, what can I do for you?" She fidgeted. "Your assistant said you might be able to help. A former client recommended you," she explained with a hesitant smile. "I see, and you are—" "Mrs. Cassandra Harper. My husband Greg is a psychologist. I suspect he's being unfaithful, and I require evidence before I initiate divorce proceedings." She presented me with a photograph, which I examined carefully. The man in the picture appeared to be in his early 40s, with a strong jawline, dark hair streaked with gray at the temples, and captivating green eyes that likely charmed many. "All right, Mrs. Harper. Are you familiar with my process?" I asked. She nodded. "You require up to 2 weeks to gather proof, and your fee is $5,000 for that period, correct?" "Precisely. Half up front. Do you have an account your husband doesn't have access to?" "I established one a few months ago," she said, handing me a cashier's check for $2,500. "A former client assured me you're the best." "Thank you. Can you elaborate on what leads you to suspect infidelity? The more details you can provide, the more effectively I can investigate." She hesitated. "He spends nights and weekends with me, but occasionally his phone is off when I call his office during lunch." "That could simply mean he's with a patient," I suggested. She frowned. "Perhaps, but he's distant at home as well. He used to be affectionate, but now he barely touches me. And I detected perfume on his clothing once, not my perfume." "A client might have hugged him," I offered. "How old is he?" 44. "Men sometimes become less physically demonstrative around that age," I explained. "Could that account for the distance?" Her voice sharpened. "Do you think I'm foolish?" "Not at all. I'm simply trying to grasp the basis of your suspicions. The perfume is a significant clue, but it could be a coincidence. I'll take the case, but I need every detail. What else seems unusual?" "Well," she added, "on Mondays and Wednesdays he usually calls before lunch, but sometimes it goes straight to voicemail." "Understood. I'll start tomorrow, Wednesday. I'll keep you updated as soon as I discover anything," I assured her. She stood shaking my hand. "Thank you, Mr. Calloway. I hope it's nothing, but I need peace of mind." "Of course, Mrs. Harper. If I don't find anything within 2 weeks, you won't owe the remainder of the fee. That's my guarantee." "Thank you, Mark," she replied with a small smile. "Just Mark, please," I said. "Mr. Calloway was my father." "All right, Mark, and call me Cassandra. Ma'am feels too formal." "Understood, Cassandra. I'll be in touch." After escorting her out, my assistant, Delilah Layla Vargas, entered and sat across from my desk. Layla had been with me for 6 years, and I couldn't envision operating the agency without her. With her jet black hair, warm brown eyes, and a natural tan, she possessed an easy charm that sometimes brought to mind a young Hollywood starlet. "All right, here's what I've compiled," she said, handing me a folder. Layla was an exceptional investigator, and I was proud to have mentored her. I opened the file and frowned. Greg Harper, psychologist. A red flag immediately caught my eye. A former patient had filed a malpractice suit against him, only for it to be mysteriously withdrawn shortly after the patient's husband divorced her. "This is suspicious," I muttered. "Layla, delve deeper into this individual. I have a bad feeling about this." "Already on it," she said with a laugh, before returning to her desk. Layla was invaluable. I compensated her well. We split the earnings 60-40, but she deserved even more. Together, we netted over $200,000 annually after taxes, with my share around $150,000 and hers at $110,000. We shared a lawyer, Jefferson Holt, who specialized in divorce cases and ensured our legal compliance. As for my wife, Rachel, formerly Rachel Lawrence, I met her 7 years ago when I moved back to Illinois after retiring from a corporate position in D.C. I'd spent 3 years in the Army as an interrogator, followed by a period investigating fraud for an insurance company. That career ultimately burned me out, leading me to launch this agency. Rachel and I met at a party, connected immediately, and married a year later. I glanced at Layla, still absorbed in her research. "Hey, when you finish up, clock out for the day. I'm heading home," I said with a smile. "No problem," she replied, her smile hinting at something more profound. "I hope Rachel knows how lucky she is," she added softly. "She does," I replied, "and someday you'll make someone very happy too." "Maybe," she shrugged, her attention back on her computer screen. "All right, gather the details, place them in a folder, and I'll pick it up tomorrow morning. Good night," I said, leaving the office. "Good night, boss," Layla called out. After paying Layla, I climbed into my car and started driving home, my thoughts consumed by Rachel's recent distance. She seemed preoccupied, but despite my repeated inquiries, she insisted everything was fine. I'd witnessed this behavior before. Emotional withdrawal, a classic precursor to or aftermath of infidelity. Why do women claim nothing's wrong when it's so plainly obvious something's bothering them? We're not mind readers. Lost in thought, I turned onto my street and immediately spotted a black Jeep Grand Cherokee parked directly outside my house. Its unfamiliar presence unsettled me. As I pulled into the driveway, my phone buzzed. "Hey, babe," I answered, seeing Rachel's name on the caller ID. "Mark, where are you? Come home, we need to talk," she said, her tone unusual. "What do you mean, we? Who's we?" My eyes flicked back to the Jeep, a sinking feeling settling in my stomach. "Just get home soon, okay?" "Okay, I love you," I said, though I felt anything but reassured. "Yeah, bye." The alarm bells in my head were deafening. I double-checked that my pocket voice recorder was operational and made sure my phone's camera was ready. Rachel's recent strange behavior, combined with the urgency in her voice, felt ominous. I stepped out of the car, snapped a quick photo of the Jeep's license plate, and walked toward the house, taking measured breaths. Inside, I saw them. Rachel was kissing a man, so engrossed they didn't notice me at first. Calmly, I took a picture, ensuring the scene was well documented, before stepping forward. "Oh my God, Mark, you scared me," Rachel exclaimed, pulling away from the man. "Care to explain why you're making out with someone in my house?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "That's why I wanted you home, Mark," she said weakly. My gaze shifted to the man, and I recognized him instantly. Greg Harper, the husband of my newest client. Anger and heartbreak warred within me, but I maintained my composure. Revenge could wait. "What exactly did you want to talk about?" I asked evenly. "Mr. Calloway, can I call you Mark?" the man ventured. "No, friends call me Mark. You're the guy screwing my wife, so don't get comfortable," I said with a bitter chuckle. "I'm Dr. Greg Harper," he announced, puffing up as if his title mattered to me. "And I'm a private investigator," I replied dryly. "Now, does therapy with my wife usually involve making out in her living room?" "Look," he began, his voice oozing condescension. "I know it seems unconventional, but this is part of her treatment." "Unconventional? Let's call it what it is. Unprofessional. How long has this therapy been going on?" 2 months, he admitted. "Rachel, why didn't you tell me you were seeing a therapist?" I asked, masking my growing anger. I didn't know how to bring it up," she stammered, avoiding my gaze. "Rachel, we've talked about this. I told you years ago, come to me if something feels off," I said. Greg interrupted smoothly, his voice almost hypnotic. "Rachel, remember what we discussed? You need to take control." Her expression hardened as she looked at me. "You always treat me like I'm just some clueless housewife," she accused. "What are you talking about? When have I ever done that?" I asked, exasperated. "After the wedding, we agreed to try new things, but you never listened to me," she snapped, though her tone wavered. "That's not true. We've always made decisions together. If something wasn't working, you just had to say so," I countered. Greg's influence was palpable. He pressed her further. "You need to assert yourself, Rachel." Her voice grew firm. Mark, I'm doing this. Watch or don't, but I'm taking control. Rachel, don't do this. There will be consequences, I warned, my voice low. Greg turned to me, arrogance radiating from him. Mr. Calloway, this is therapy. If you have a chair in your bedroom, I suggest using it. It's necessary for her breakthrough. A breakthrough? Or are you just trying to get laid? I shot back. Mark, this is an infidelity, he said with mock sincerity. It's part of her mental healing process. You're delusional if you think I'm buying that. It's cheating, no matter how you dress it up, I said, noticing the absence of a wedding ring on his hand. Call it what you want, but I'm helping her, he insisted. By now, my love for Rachel had transformed into cold, steely resolve. Without another word, I followed them into the master bedroom, my iPhone discreetly recording every move. Greg began undressing Rachel while she complied without hesitation. Neither noticed me capturing it all. Last chance, I said quietly. Don't do this. I won't stand for it. Greg glanced at my phone but didn't seem to realize it was recording. Like you have a choice, he sneered. That was all I needed. I strode forward, grabbed him by the hair, and delivered a precise strike to the nerve bundle near his shoulder, dropping him to the floor. Dr. Harper, I said calmly, towering over him, did my wife mention what I do for a living? He looked confused, but Rachel was visibly stunned. I'm a private investigator, I continued. Now I have concrete proof of your affair. I'll be divorcing her for infidelity and suing you for alienation of affection. He winced, and I drew my weapon, a reliable Colt 1911 that had served me well over the years. Get dressed, grab your things, and get out of my house, both of you, I said icily, my voice compact but firm. Rachel sighed heavily, her face a storm of emotions. I stared at the woman who had just shattered my trust. Rachel, get dressed, pack your things, and leave, I said, my voice steady but cold. What? She demanded, her tone disbelieving. You heard me. I warned you about the consequences, and they start now. Pack your bags. I'm calling my lawyer to file for divorce and secure a restraining order against you and Greg. My voice cracked slightly, but I pressed on. I'm glad we never had kids, I continued, my voice raw. I won't be a father to children raised by someone who betrayed me. Her expression shifted, confusion mixing with shock and guilt. Mark, don't you love me anymore? She asked, almost pleading. Not after you allowed another man to, despite my protests, take you in our bed, I replied sharply. You've desecrated everything we built together, ripped apart the vows we made. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain tearing through me. I can't believe I never really knew you, Rachel, I said, using her full name, knowing how much she hated it and how much it conveyed my anger. Remember what we talked about before we got married? You said you had zero tolerance for cheaters. Well, congratulations, you fit the definition. I took you at your word back then. Clearly that was a mistake. Before she could respond, Greg hissed under his breath, looking ready to pounce. I kept my Colt steady, my eyes flicking between him and Rachel. You're making a big mistake, Mr. Calloway, Greg sneered. I'll press charges for assault. No mistake, I said, my voice like ice. I caught you in my house, in my bed, with my wife. It sure looked like she was being coerced, and that's what I'll tell the cops. Who do you think they'll believe? The respected private investigator, or the so-called therapist with a history of malpractice claims? I gestured toward Rachel, whose face was flushed with anguish. I got here just in time to stop whatever this was. Maybe I should be the one calling the police. Greg's confidence faltered, his face paling. Okay, let's not do anything drastic, he said, attempting a weak grin that didn't land. I notice you haven't mentioned your wife, I said, my tone biting. You think you're keeping secrets from me? Trust me, you're not. I decided to twist the knife a little further. I'm sure the media would love a story like this. Private investigator's wife caught in bed with her therapist. Imagine the headlines. His face turned crimson. You can't go public with this, he stammered, scrambling to put on his clothes. Why not? I asked, shaking my head in disgust. Please, he said, practically begging. Don't make this public. Here's my offer. Here's my offer, I said, stepping closer. You refund every dime my soon-to-be ex-wife paid you, and I might keep it private. But I'm still suing you for malpractice. Deal, he stammered, cornered. Whatever you want. I smirked, savoring the fear in his eyes. Good. Now get dressed and get out. He bolted for the door, slamming it behind him. I turned to Rachel, anger still blazing in my chest. Mark, we can work through this. she said, tears streaming down her face. Work through this? Where was this working through things when I walked in on you with him? Where was your love then? I asked, my voice laced with contempt. Get dressed, pack up, and leave. You've got 1 hour. I suggest heading to your parents' place. Rachel's face crumpled, but she said nothing. Instead, she began packing. I didn't care if she took our suitcases. I'd replace them. I watched her go about it silently, then carry her packed bags to her car. When she was done, as she drove away, I slammed the door behind her and headed straight to my office. I made several calls, starting with Jefferson. I asked him to prepare the divorce papers and restraining orders against Rachel and Greg. I also instructed him to file lawsuits for alienation of affection and unethical conduct. Next, I called a locksmith, promising a hefty tip for a rush job on changing every lock in the house. Then I contacted a furniture store, ordering a new queen-sized bed, linens, and comforter. When the delivery guy asked why I wanted the old bed hauled into the backyard, I told him I wasn't paying him to ask questions. He wisely kept quiet. While waiting for the locksmith and the furniture delivery, I canceled Rachel's credit and debit cards through the bank, ensuring she couldn't access our joint accounts anymore. I poured myself 2 stiff shots of whiskey to calm my nerves, sipping as I reflected on how my marriage had unraveled. By 7 p.m., the house felt like a stranger's. I realized I couldn't endure the silence alone any longer. Grabbing my phone, I called Layla. Hola, boss, she answered cheerfully. Hey, Layla, I said, proud that the whiskey hadn't slurred my words. I need your help tonight. What's wrong, Mark? She asked, concern replacing her usual light-hearted tone. It's complicated. I can't explain over the phone. Can you come over? On my way, she replied without hesitation, hanging up before I could thank her. 10 minutes later, she knocked on my door. I opened it, and before I could say anything, Layla pulled me into a tight hug, closing the door behind her. She locked it and led me to the couch, sitting beside me. So, where's Rachel? She asked, already piecing together the situation from the absence of Rachel's car in the driveway and my red, puffy eyes. She's gone. Probably at her parents', I said, my voice breaking. She cheated on me, Layla. The dam burst. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Layla wrapped her arms around me and let me cry into her shoulder, her presence the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. After a while, I managed to calm down. Layla gently pushed me back on the couch, her eyes searching mine. Mark, are you sure Rachel was cheating? She asked softly. Unable to speak, I set my pocket recorder on the coffee table and hit play. I followed it up by showing her the video on my phone. As Layla watched, her expression shifted from disbelief to horror. She paused both. The recording and the video ended. I went to grab us a couple of beers. When I returned, the anger in Layla's eyes was unmistakable. That damn witch, Layla hissed, accepting the beer and taking a sip. I couldn't help but smile slightly at her fierce loyalty. After taking a deep breath, she asked, Mark, what's the plan? I suspect Greg manipulated Rachel, maybe even brainwashed her. If that's the case, I want her to get help. But as for him, I want him exposed, though I'll leave his wife out of it. She doesn't deserve more pain. My voice was hoarse. That's some serious crap, Layla replied. What's the first step? Recon, I said, slipping into professional mode. I'm heading to his office tonight. If breaking in is too much, you don't have to come. Screw that. I'm in, Layla said immediately, her determination evident. She hugged me tightly, and for a fleeting moment, I considered kissing her, but stopped myself. Layla, I said, my voice steady, I know what you're thinking. It's tempting, but we need to focus on this first. I forced myself to keep things professional. Good call, boss, she replied, hiding her emotions, but making her feelings clear. It had always been obvious that Layla cared deeply for me, but now that Rachel was out of the picture, I could see the depth of her affection. I couldn't deny a part of me wanted the same, but I refused to betray my values. If Rachel had been coerced, reconciliation might still be possible. I didn't want to hurt Layla if that happened. We took her car to the office and picked up the van, camouflaging it with some fake Comcast magnets. Layla grinned at the touch. Nice, she said as we headed out. We arrived at Greg Harper's office around 11:00 p.m. I picked the lock, wearing gloves that wouldn't leave a trace, but still allowed full dexterity. Once inside, I checked my earpiece. "Reading you loud and clear," Layla said. I had a 50-gigabyte USB drive ready as I moved toward Greg's computer. My mission was clear. Find out how many others he'd victimized. If he did this to Rachel, he could have done it to others. Pretending to be Greg, I called the building security company, claiming I'd forgotten my password. My authoritative tone worked perfectly. The lack of proper verification made me shake my head. "Amateurs." Layla giggled in my earpiece. "I know, right?" I whispered, chuckling softly. "I know, right?" As I made my way into Greg's office, the room felt stark. No family photos on the desk, no personal touches. It was clear Greg didn't care about his wife or any semblance of a normal home life. He had everything he needed to manipulate others. I sat at his computer. Password protected. Figures. Thinking about what I knew of him, I tried a few guesses. Romeo, access denied. Casanova, access denied. Lovers bingo, access granted. What a predictable idiot, I muttered, shaking my head. I immediately started downloading files, including those from a folder labeled Special Patients. It was packed with incriminating material, videos, notes, and more. Rachel's name stood out, and I opened the folder. My chest tightened as I saw the contents. The 50-gigabyte drive was almost full when I finished. "Anything on paper?" Layla asked through the earpiece. "No," I replied. "He's not dumb enough to leave hard copies of incriminating details, but I've got 45 gigs of videos and files. This guy's worse than I thought." "Damn," Layla muttered. "We'll go through it all when we get home." She emphasized home in a way that caught my attention, but I let it slide for now. I carefully shut everything down, locked up behind me, and ensured we left no trace. With no security cameras and an untraceable phone call, there was nothing to connect us to the break-in. By the time we returned to my house, it was after 1:00 a.m. I pulled into the garage and closed the door. Layla looked at me, her expression serious. "I'm staying here tonight, Mark," she said firmly. "Okay, the guest room is yours," I replied with a shrug. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I'll stay in your room. You don't need to be alone tonight." The tension in the room was palpable. "Layla, I trust you more than anyone right now, but don't make me break my marriage vows tonight," I said, my voice soft but resolute. "I promise," she said with a small smile, kissing my cheek gently. "Let's go through the footage in the morning. I brought my laptop so we can split the work." "Sounds like a plan," I said, heading for the shower. Under the water, all the betrayal and anger I'd been suppressing came flooding back. I felt dirty, inside and out. Suddenly, the shower door opened, but Layla didn't intrude. She simply helped me to bed, covered me with a blanket, and lay down on the other side. Exhaustion overtook me, and I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, Layla was holding me tightly. Her warmth was comforting, but I knew I had to address the situation. "Layla, listen," I began. She reluctantly pulled back and nodded. "I'm sorry for what I said last night. It felt like a nightmare. And I'd be lying if I said I never thought about you, in that way. But I loved Rachel. At least, the version of her I thought I knew. If it turns out she agreed to everything willingly, I'll divorce her. If that happens, and you still feel the same, we can try, but not before." Her expression softened. "That's why I fell in love with you, Mark. You're the most honest man I've ever met." Her voice carried admiration, but also sadness. "Thanks, sweetheart," I said. When I went to get dressed, Layla wasn't in the room. I heard the sound of a frying pan in the kitchen and smiled. Throwing on jeans and a t-shirt, I secured my CT in its holster and joined her. I typically didn't carry it home, but considering the situation with a potentially dangerous and manipulative psychologist, I wasn't about to take chances. I saw Lilo was also prepared, her 9mm Smith & Wesson holstered at her hip. Essential ever since she got her concealed carry permit after joining my team. "Smells good," I said, offering a genuine smile for the first time since everything went sideways. "Thanks, Mark," she replied with a smirk, concentrating on an omelet loaded with bacon, cheese, and salsa. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts and last night's jeans, yet somehow managed to look effortlessly stunning. "Lila, I know this is going to be difficult for us both," I began, taking a seat at the kitchen counter. She arched an eyebrow. Don't patronize me, boss. From the day you hired me, you were upfront about dealing with tough situations. With my background in criminal justice, you knew I was reliable. And that hasn't changed. It never will. Sure, I've fallen for you, but that doesn't mean I'm backing down from this. This is personal for me, too. Rachel was my friend. That doctor's going to regret everything he's done by the time we're through. Everything she said was accurate. Lila had been an LAPD detective for 2 years before losing her badge for hitting a suspect. Although the charges were dropped, her career ended discreetly with a modest severance package to avoid unwanted publicity. She'd confided in me during her interview, and her candor earned my respect and secured her a position on my team. I needed someone who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty, and Lila was the perfect fit. You're right, I conceded, nodding. Lila, there's something I have to tell you. Something even Rachel doesn't know. She tilted her head, intrigued. What is it? Taking a deep breath, I revealed. I've never worked for an insurance company. I was a covert operative running my own operations. My name is Mark Calloway. I used to be a spy. Sounds like something out of Burn Notice, right? Lila stared at me for a beat, then calmly plated our breakfast and set it on the counter with our coffee. God bless you, Mark, she said with a shrug. I kind of suspected that, or that you had a criminal record. I chuckled. What gave me away? You're constantly scanning your surroundings like you're expecting an ambush. You know way too much about surveillance equipment and locks to be just an insurance investigator. Plus, you're one of the best I've ever seen. I laughed, shaking my head. You're good, Lila. And I make the best coffee in the world, she teased, grinning as she took a sip. You do, I agreed. I'm not just a pretty face and a hot body, you know, she added with a wink. Of course not. If you were, I wouldn't have hired you, I replied with a shrug. She kissed my cheek. Thanks, Mark, for everything. No matter what happens, I'm here. You're not going anywhere, Lila. You'll be working with me until we're old and gray. Damn right I will, she said with a grin. And for the record, I wouldn't leave, even if someone offered me $1 million a day. Good, because I can't afford that, I joked. And you're the best partner I could ask for. I'm glad you finally realized that, boss. Now eat before I decide to slap some sense into you, she teased, sticking out her tongue. I mirrored her gesture before diving into the meal. Lila's cooking was incredible, a testament to how practical and skilled she was. Rachel, despite her flaws, had also been a good cook, but Lila was in a different league. If Rachel's cooking ever made her feel inadequate, it would have been understandable. It wasn't just her culinary abilities, though. Lila's loyalty, humor, and competence made her exceptional. Still, a part of me couldn't stop thinking about Rachel. I couldn't believe she'd gone to Greg without telling me. It was out of character. She'd always been open, at least at the beginning of our marriage. Everything had changed since those therapy sessions started. When breakfast was finished, I helped Lila with the dishes. As we were wrapping up, she turned, wrapped her arms around my neck, and pulled me close. I'm sorry, Mark, she whispered. No, Lila, I said, chuckling softly. I don't think either of us regrets this. Damn, I wish I'd met you before, Rachel. Me too, she replied, her voice laced with sadness. Someone was going to get hurt regardless of what happened, and I hated that. If Rachel had been coerced or manipulated, I needed to know before making any decisions about our future. Let's go watch the videos, I said, my expression shifting. Maybe they'll tell us more about Rachel's state of mind. In my home office, we split the work. I copied half the videos onto Lila's laptop, and we started with Rachel's sessions. The first video was unremarkable, a standard introduction. Greg was taking notes as he asked Rachel about her life, focusing on her family and relationships, but I detected something unsettling in his sly grin. In the second clip, the questions became more intimate. Rachel hesitated but answered after Greg reassured her. At the end, he stressed the confidentiality of their sessions. I clenched my jaw. By the third video, Greg's manipulation was evident. He was pushing professional boundaries, subtly guiding Rachel towards his objectives. In the fourth video, his intentions became clear. He asked Rachel to describe her fantasies in explicit detail. She hesitated, but complied. From the fifth video on, the pattern continued. Greg bolstered Rachel's self-esteem while subtly encouraging selfishness. By the 14th session, he'd convinced her that having two men, including him, was part of her therapy. In the 15th video, he finally succeeded in seducing her. I stopped the final video, unable to stomach any more. Lila looked at me, tears in her eyes, her disgust mirroring my own. "This guy is a serial predator," I said, my voice low and cold. "Yeah, that was pretty clear from his computer password," Lila replied, referring to the earlier break-in. "I'm going to hit him with such a powerful legal blow, he'll wish he'd never been born," I vowed. "I'm with you, boss," Lila said, perching on the edge of my desk. For what it's worth, Rachel held out the longest. The other women didn't last nearly as long. It wasn't much comfort, but her encouraging smile helped. I figured as much, since most of the women's stories are shorter than Rachel's. "But you've just confirmed it," Lila said, her voice sharp with frustration. "This guy makes Machiavelli look like a saint." I shook my head. "But as far as coercion or brainwashing goes, he's not guilty. He's just manipulative, convincing them no harm will come of it." "Yeah, I've noticed that too," Lila replied. "From what I've seen, he never brings the husbands into his little games, but somehow the husbands always find out, and it ends in divorce." She glanced at her notes. "Start contacting a couple of the ex-husbands. Find out how they discovered Dr. Dumbass seducing their wives," I instructed. "I need to talk to Cassandra." Lila nodded and left the room as I pulled out my phone and called Cassandra. "Hello?" she answered, her voice curious. "Hi, Cassandra. It's Mark," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Oh, Mark. Thanks for calling. Are you starting the investigation today?" "Actually, it's finished," I said. "You were more right than you realized. Would you mind coming over today or tomorrow? We need to discuss this, both personal and professional matters." Her voice grew cautious. "Would you like to talk now?" "Not over the phone," I replied. "Tonight or tomorrow morning would be best. My assistant Lila will be here too. She has information to share." "What's your address?" she asked. I gave it to her, and she promised to be over in 10 minutes. 11 minutes later, a sleek Jaguar XJ6 pulled into my driveway. I opened the door as Lila brought out fresh coffee. I retrieved both our laptops, setting them on the coffee table, and Lila and I sat on either side of Cassandra. "Cassandra," I began, "Gene is a serial predator. He abuses his professional authority to seduce women and betray their husbands behind their backs." Lila added, "He only preys on married women. There's no record of him targeting anyone single." I nodded. "He gains their trust, then steers conversations towards issues or fantasies. Using that information, he manipulates them into doing exactly what he wants." We showed her the series of videos, and Cassandra's face turned beet red with rage. "How the hell did he keep this secret?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Cassandra, please calm down," I said gently. "There's more." Her expression shifted to shock. "More?" "This case is very personal to me," I admitted. "Rachel was his latest victim." I opened the folder containing Rachel's name and highlighted her videos. Cassandra gasped, then hugged me tightly. "Mark, I'm so sorry. He's going to pay for this, I swear." "I appreciate that," I said, my voice thick. "I'm going to sue him for alienation of affection and negligence, but I need to know how much is Gene worth." She let out a bitter laugh. "Over $250 million, including properties worldwide. His practice, books, and guest appearances on shows like Dr. Phil have made him filthy rich. Most of his money comes from his books, though." I leaned forward. "Then we're hitting him with a blitz. Hard and fast. It'll take a couple of days to prepare, but I need to know if you trust Lila and me to handle this." She nodded, determination in her eyes. "You've lost as much as I have, Mark. I trust you completely." "Good. Here's the plan," I explained. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. I'll introduce you to Jefferson, my attorney. He's handling my divorce and lawsuits against Jean. By Friday, we'll have other ex-husbands lined up to sue him for malpractice and alienation of affection." "That sounds perfect," Cassandra said, nodding. "The only issue is acting normal around him for 2 more days." "Tell him you're visiting your mom," I suggested. "She can help cover for you. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay here. There's room in the garage for your car, and the guest room has a double bed." Cassandra smiled, taking the garage remote. "Thank you, Mark." She left to pack, and Lila did the same, returning half an hour later with a week's worth of clothes. I couldn't help but chuckle as she carried everything straight into my room, stacking it neatly in Rachel's old dresser. Lila was nothing if not determined. The next morning, Cassandra arrived just as I was getting up. Lila was in the shower when I heard the garage door open. Cassandra greeted me with a sympathetic hug. She brought a small suitcase along with copies of Gene's financial statements that made me whistle. His liquid assets were staggering. After Lila made us another fantastic breakfast, Cassandra was ready to proceed. I explained that we needed to call the 11 ex-husbands to coordinate separate lawsuits for negligence and alienation of affection. Most of them were eager for revenge, and surprisingly, many of the ex-wives agreed to join in. I decided not to involve Rachel. After what I'd seen in the final videos, I couldn't stomach the idea. By Friday, Jefferson's office was packed with 9 ex-husbands and their respective ex-wives. As the 12th in line, I helped finalize our cases. Jefferson, excited by the scale of the operation, quickly drew up identical legal filings for each client. Nearly $175 million in liquid assets and $100 million in real estate were on the line. A class action suit would have been simpler, but I wanted Jean to feel the full impact of each case individually. When Jefferson finally finished, it was my turn. I filed for divorce from Rachel, while Cassandra filed for hers against Jean. I couldn't help but notice the spark of interest between Jefferson and Cassandra as they spoke. The attraction seemed mutual. We ensured that each client's legal documents were delivered by different process servers at the same time. Jefferson, Cassandra, Lila, and I shared a knowing grin as we prepared for Monday morning. Lila and I planned to be there to watch everything unfold, sitting alongside Cassandra. Jefferson even provided every client with a free restraining order against Harper, clearly anticipating the wealth he'd earn once the fallout from this operation settled. Once everything was in motion, it was time for the next phase. I used clips from Rachel's sessions, carefully editing out her face and replacing her voice with a computer-generated one. I ensured no mention of her or my name appeared, using a new media editing program. I compiled excerpts from other women's sessions that demonstrated how Harper had manipulated them and guided them into destroying their marriages for his own gain. The result painted a clear picture of Harper's manipulative tactics and ethical violations. To remain anonymous, I created a dummy email account routed through proxy servers and sent the footage to news outlets and law enforcement agencies. I knew this would get the attention of both the media and the FBI, who would be interested in the sheer scale of Harper's malpractice. Monday morning, after the process servers delivered their papers, I handed Cassandra a bucket of popcorn. She was already snacking when Harper bolted out of his office, looking frantic and enraged. Spotting us, Cassandra, Lila, and me, standing together, he screamed incoherently, clutching his legal papers. I calmly pressed the send button on my phone to release the edited footage. As we got into my car, he dropped to his knees in the parking lot, crying while we drove away. It was satisfying to see him unravel, but I knew my work wasn't done. Later that week, I met with Rachel at a Starbucks to bring closure to our relationship. She arrived looking hopeful, but her face fell as I began to speak. "Rachel, I could forgive you if you were coerced or brainwashed," I told her. "But after 16 hours of recording showing you agreeing to everything he said, and even suggesting I deserve to be betrayed, I can't." Her eyes widened. "Mark, I wasn't in my right mind. You have to believe me," she pleaded. I shook my head. I loved you, Rachel. Loved. Past tense. This betrayal ended everything. You've already received the divorce papers. I handed her the documents. I think you'll find them fair. She scanned the papers, her expression panicked. You're kidding me, she whispered. If I were you, I'd figure out what to tell your parents, I said coldly. They just received an anonymous letter detailing your actions. With that, I stood and walked out, leaving her in stunned silence. Jefferson later informed me that Rachel and her lawyer wanted to renegotiate the terms of the divorce. I brought Lila along for support. Rachel's lawyer, an imposing woman, greeted us stiffly. Mr. Calloway, these terms are unacceptable. You've destroyed Rachel's reputation. I leaned back in my chair. Miss Albrook, I have evidence that would sway any judge or jury. Rachel conspired with her lover to betray me. My offer is generous. Where is this evidence? She asked skeptically. Jefferson slid a DVD across the table. This contains recordings of Rachel's final sessions with Harper, as well as video evidence of their affair and its planning. We have more, if you'd like. The lawyer's confidence faded as she reviewed the material. After consulting with Rachel, she said, "We agree to your terms." The papers were signed, notarized, and filed. The divorce would be finalized in 30 days, and the clock began ticking. During those weeks, Lila and I grew closer. While we shared affectionate moments, I held back from going further until my divorce was official. When the day came, the judge banged the gavel, making it official. I turned to Lila and kissed her deeply, no longer needing to hold back. As we parted, Rachel approached, her voice trembling. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I ruined the best thing I had," she said, tears streaming down her face. Lila stepped forward before I could respond. "Rachel, I've loved Mark since I first met him. I kept my distance because he loved you, but when you betrayed him, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I love him, and I promise I'll take care of him." Rachel hugged Lila tightly, tears still falling, before walking away. Over the next 2 years, the fallout from the lawsuits against Harper continued to play out. Several couples he had torn apart reconciled after receiving settlements. Rachel moved to the West Coast, reinventing herself as a dominatrix, a fitting reflection of the damage Harper had done to her psyche. Her parents, still furious after receiving the video of her betrayal, cut ties with her. Cassandra's divorce from Harper left her with a massive settlement. Harper, on the other hand, lost everything: his license, his wealth, and his freedom. He was convicted on multiple charges of malpractice and ethical violations, and before sentencing, someone delivered their own brand of justice. Harper was hospitalized with shattered knees and broken arms. When he finally went to prison, he lasted only 2 days before ending his own life. Jefferson and Cassandra grew close during the fallout, and eventually married, with Lila and me standing as their maid of honor and best man. Jefferson retired on the wealth he earned from the lawsuits, and the couple planned to spend their golden years traveling. As for Lila and me, the lawsuits left us with $15 million, enough to retire comfortably. We're now raising 2 children, our son Gary and our daughter Emma. They've brought us more joy than we ever imagined. That final case was a storm of betrayal, heartbreak, and injustice, but it ended with a brighter future than I ever expected.